Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and today we've got a replay for you in the German Tier 10 Behemoth. Or is it Behemoth? You know what, I actually have no idea how to pronounce that word. I probably shouldn't have used it. Don't worry, we'll edit this out later. The German Tier 10 battleship, the Große Kurrywurst, and it's sailed for us today by, this seems like a very, very familiar name. Colonel Heinrich von Hobe. I'm sure I've shown one of his replays before, but anyway, you're getting another one of his replays today. There it is, the Kurrywurst. I think this is the biggest ship in the game. I know it's bigger than the Yamato, and the Yamato is not exactly a small ship. And I'm pretty sure it also, when you take its secondaries into account, has the heaviest broadside in the game, although the Montana's broadside is nothing to be ashamed of. Most German battleship players, because German battleships do have very, very strong secondaries, particularly with the inertia fuse high explosive skill. Because for some reason, German battleships, generally speaking, when you're looking at figuring out the penetration of your high explosive shells, you take the caliber and you divide by 6, but German battleships take the caliber and divide by 4. And this also applies to the Kurrywurst's 128 and 150mm secondaries as well. Let's just take a second to actually talk about the secondaries on the Kurrywurst here. I mean, leaving aside those 12 those 12 stonking great main battery guns, this ship also has 20 128mm secondary guns, 10 on each side. Just think about that for a minute. That's like having 2 USS Fletchers strapped to each side of the ship. And that's before you even take into consideration the fact that it also has 8 150mm secondaries as well. And the base range for the secondaries on this ship is 7 kilometers. I'm pretty sure Heinrich here has heavily specialized in secondary gun battery skills for this ship, because the secondaries are hitting targets at ranges well in excess of 7 kilometers. And it makes sense when you're playing German battleships, because their secondaries are very, very strong. I don't know if he has the inertia fuse for high explosive shell skills, but I am guarantee that he has the manual fire control for secondaries. And you'll see it in effect later on in this game. Now, on a tier 10 battleship like the Kurrywurst here, manual fire control for secondaries increases the accuracy of your secondary gun batteries by 60%. So it's a very, very useful skill to have if you have a German battleship that has lots and lots and lots of secondary guns. But it is a bit of a double-edged sword, because manual control is exactly that. If you don't pick a target by holding down control and clicking on the target that you want your secondaries to engage, they won't fire at a thing. So if you're going to take this skill, you really do need to pay attention to what's going on around you. Also, it can come with other significant drawbacks. If you don't have manual fire control for the secondary guns, then they will just engage whatever targets are within range, all around the ship. If you do have manual fire control, even if you have targets on the port and the starboard side, you can only target one of them. Let's say, for example, you have an enemy cruiser on the port side of your ship and you have an enemy destroyer on the starboard side of the ship. You target the enemy destroyer as the focus for your secondaries. All 14 of the secondaries on the port side of the ship will do nothing. Even though there's an enemy cruiser sitting a kilometer away, they will not fire, because you've targeted the destroyer on the starboard side. So all the port gun batteries are trying to shoot the target on the starboard side, and they can't. So they don't fire at anything. So again, this is something you need to bear in mind if you do have that manual fire control for secondary armament skill. Target selection is very, very important. Now, it's been a fairly slow game for Heinrich so far. He's only done 1,350 damage, but he's just scored 3 armor-piercing penetrations on that Bismarck down over there on the other side of the map before he disappeared. So that's boosted his damage total so far to 14,715. Now, at the beginning of the match, the team agreed that they were going to go for Bravo and Charlie and completely ignore Alpha. But there's always somebody who's not paying attention or just wants to do their own thing. And so a couple of ships have decided to head off down to Alpha to contest that and fight half of the enemy team alone and unsupported. And well, you can figure out how well that's going to go for them. Meanwhile, Heinrich is setting up some shots at this Attigo. Now he gets the shots away before the Attigo pops out of view, and he is going to score a couple of blind hits, further boosting his damage total up to 19,170. Still nothing spectacular, but it's early days yet. So far, as planned, the team control Bravo and Charlie, exactly as discussed at the beginning of the game, but they are still behind on points, although there's not that much of a difference, because they're down 3 ships, and I'm pretty sure most, if not all 3 of those ships died fighting for Alpha, because they weren't paying attention to team chat at the beginning of the match. Now, for the next couple of minutes, you're going to start to see some wildly inconsistent results with the hits scored using the 420mm guns on this ship. He just hit that Bismarck with a penetration with his armour piercing and barely did 1,000 damage. The Bismarck's being forced to turn to avoid the torpedoes fired by that destroyer up ahead, so he's presenting a fairly good target, and the range is barely 11 kilometres. But salvo after salvo hits and connects on this Bismarck, and we're seeing penetrations with no damage, we're seeing penetrations with barely 1,000 damage, we're seeing penetrations, same number of penetrations, with 4,000 to 5,000 damage. I'm not entirely sure exactly what's going on here. I think that it's possible he's penetrating the deck armour, for example, but then the shot is failing to penetrate the Citadel armour underneath the deck. So they're registering as penetrations when technically they're really over penetrations, but, well, the secondaries are opening up now. 9.8 kilometres, and these 150 and 128mm secondaries are starting to score hits. You couldn't really ask for much better of a target than that Bismarck is showing, and the Bismarck doesn't have any choice in this matter because he had to turn to avoid torpedoes. The Bismarck's returning fire, and, well, he's lost one of his gun turrets, but shots are in the air. Finally, good number of penetrations, a kill, and a decent amount of damage. And with the Bismarck dead for the first time in this match, Heinrich's team are ahead on points and they're ahead on kills. They've managed to sink 4 enemy ships while still only losing the 3 of their own. And bizarrely enough, despite the fact that the enemy team did successfully manage to defend the capture of A, the enemy team haven't bothered trying to cap it for themselves. And in fact, right now, one of the cruisers on Heinrich's team is thinking to himself, well, screw it, if you're not going to cap it, I will. And he's sliding in there and starting the capture of A all by himself. Meanwhile, Heinrich is working on eliminating another Bismarck from the enemy team's lineup, and again, shooting at the Bismarcks, we're seeing some wildly inconsistent damage numbers. His first shot at the Bismarck resulted in 1 penetration, which did less than 4,000 damage. His second shot at the Bismarck resulted in 1 over penetration, which did more than 5,000 damage. He's at 51,000 damage now, well, 57,000 again, just about every time he unloads his guns at this Bismarck, regardless of how many penetrations, over penetrations, bounces, failures to penetrate that he scores on this ship, he can't seem to do more than 5,000 damage. The Bismarck's probably going to get sick of it long before he does, because 5,000 damage per 6 shots fired it's going to add up after a while. But here, watch. Forward turrets unload. And rear turrets unload, forward turrets score, 1 penetration, knocks out a gun, no damage. Rear turrets, 2 penetrations, 3,000 damage. He did over 5,000 damage with an over penetration earlier. It just, I got nothing. I can't explain it. I don't know what the hell's going on. Anyway, leaving all that aside, Heinrich's team now have triple the points of the enemy team, and the enemy team have just finally realised that if they don't take one of these capture circles, they're probably going to lose. So here comes the enemy Yamato. Oh, 3 citadels and 55,000 damage is going to leave the kind of mark that they're probably not going to be able to polish out too easily. And his secondaries are hammering away at the Yamato as well, but he doesn't get the kill. Before the Yamato went down, however, he was able to sink one of the team's North Carolinas. And that's when the enemy Kurrywurst makes an appearance. Now he's turning broadside onto a smokescreen that's full of friendly destroyers, and that's a very, very brave move. It's bad news for Heinrich, however, because he's never going to manage to do significant damage to a Kurrywurst at that kind of angle. Or so you'd think. Yep, that was a citadel from the front. I can only assume that the 18-inch armour-piercing shell went through the bridge window, bounced off the captain's beard and buried itself in the boiler room. I have no idea. You explain it. Anyway, the enemy Kurrywurst is now, of course, as advertised, being forced to turn towards that smoke screen, which most unexpectedly launched torpedoes at him, and that's making him a sitting duck. Not just for Heinrich's secondaries, which have been hammering him mercilessly for the last couple of minutes, but also for these massive 420mm guns. Good night, sweet prince. Hurrah! Surely this game will be over soon. Well, yes, but not the way you might think. Heinrich's team are actually losing. Wait, what? How did they fuck that up? I have no idea. There's only 4 of them left. The enemy team are still behind on points, but Heinrich's team only controls one of the caps. They've just lost Alpha, Bravo is being contested, they still hold Charlie, and they're outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. Another Bismarck in range, another stab at the damage lottery with the 420mm guns, and this time 4 penetrations, less than 10,000 damage. I don't know, no idea. Still, it's enough to get him the high caliber, because he's now done 178,000 damage, and also earned the Bane of the Seas award, and it's the first time I've seen that one. Looking for a second salvo at the Bismarck to, who knows, score 8 penetrations and do 5,000 damage, but no, he's gone. Heinrich, still detected. Who can that be? Aha! It's an Attigo, and he's taking evasive manoeuvres. So, with nothing better to shoot at, Heinrich unloads at him, scatters the shots around his predicted course. The bad news is that while Heinrich's team are still ahead on points, the enemy team are now gaining points at a faster rate because they hold 2 of the caps. Alpha and Bravo are under control of the enemy, and Charlie, this capture point right here, is the only one that Heinrich's team still hold. And there are the Attigo's torpedoes, spotted by the destroyer up ahead. There is actually a 4th ship still alive on the team, Tier 10, Russian cruiser, the Moskva. We haven't seen him for quite some time. There he is, all the way over to the other end of the map, doing his own thing, and he's gotten himself involved in a gunfight with the Hindenburg. And that's probably not going to work out too well for him, because there's absolutely nothing the rest of the team can do to support him. The Hindenburg has the health advantage. Moskva's turned towards the Hindenburg to reduce the effectiveness of his armor-piercing shells, but the Hindenburg's just switched to the high explosive, and he's already managed to set him on fire. Meanwhile, gunnery duel going on between 2 Yugamos here. Enemy Yugamo closing in. Friendly Yugamo pops his smoke. Heinrich's division mate, Chief Specialist up ahead in the Yamato, has just drawn a bead on the enemy Attigo and is about to unload some armor-piercing into him. The friendly Moskva has been set on fire again by the Hindenburg, and his damage control ability is on cooldown. The Attigo is down, the Moskva is down, the enemy Yugamo has managed to find the friendly Yugamo in his smokescreen with his guns. The friendly Yugamo is down as well. It's just Chief Specialist in the Yamato and Heinrich in the Kurrywurst against 5 enemy ships. They are still ahead on points, but there's no longer a huge difference between the 2 teams, except for, the fact that one of them outnumbers the other by nearly 2 to 1 and controls 2 of the caps. And that's when this Bismarck decides to take his brave pills. Perhaps he thinks he can use that smokescreen, and yet he is detected. Heinrich's focusing his secondaries on him, and the hits are starting to add up. But it's not the secondaries that are going to cause the pain. It's these 420mm primaries, all 12 of them. No citadels, but that was a lot of damage, and he's on fire. The Bismarck, however, has just made it into the cover of the smoke, and he does manage to get a salvo away at Heinrich. But it's the Hindenburg who's detecting him at the moment, although he's not going to stay detected for long. The Bismarck, taken full advantage of the fact that he is momentarily spotted, and you can see the Bismarck's secondaries are working him over as well as a salvo comes in from the Hindenburg. Causes a couple of thousand damage, and then momentarily he's undetected. And that's when he spots the Bismarck again. Now these 2 ships can now see each other. The Bismarck is no longer covered by the smokescreen. Instantly, Heinrich's secondaries open up again. But the Bismarck, perhaps emboldened by the fact that he did so well in the damage lottery against the Kurrywurst earlier, is sailing broadside on, and hasn't yet figured out that at that kind of the range, if you're sailing broadside on to a Kurrywurst, it's a paddling. And so he's dead too. The last salvo from the Hindenburg managed to set Heinrich on fire, but it's only one fire. It's not going to sink him. Heinrich wants to kill that Hindenburg before any additional support arrives for him, so he pops his sonar, launches his spotter aircraft, and that's when the sonar pops up the enemy Kagero that was lurking around the side of the island waiting to ambush him with torpedoes. The Kagero panics, pops his smoke screen, but sonar can see through smoke, and he's dead too, but he did manage to get his torpedoes away. Now unfortunately for Heinrich, he's in a ship with the biggest turning circle in the game, so well, he's managed to get the nose of the ship pointed towards those torpedoes, but it is a fairly narrow spread, and he's going to take 2 of them right on the chin. And with the width of this ship, he's lucky that he didn't take 3, as one of them scrapes the paint right down the port side of the ship, but his secondaries have managed to hit and set the Hindenburg on fire. Now, the Hindenburg is angled quite well here, and so this armour-piercing salvo from the 2 forward turrets does nothing really other than knock out one of the Hindenburg's gun turrets. And Heinrich's detected again. The Hindenburg, of course, has torpedoes, and he's well inside torpedo launch range. And that's when the rear turrets smack this guy right in the broadside and do a significant amount of damage as he turns, obviously to get those torpedoes away. However, the wreck of the Kagero is directly in his line of fire. And so Heinrich, obviously expecting the torpedoes to be coming, turns away and goes to full speed. He can't actually see the Hindenburg in the smoke anymore, but he is detected. And there's the Hindenburg's torpedoes. It's not the Hindenburg who's spotting him. It's those cheeky little buggers over there. He takes one of the Hindenburg's torpedoes in the stern, and that has caused some flooding. And there's nothing he can do about it at the moment because his damage control is on cooldown. However, he is going to be able to start recovering some health with the damage repair consumable, which is about to come off cooldown, if he can just stay alive for the length of time that it's going to take. There it is, starts recovering some health. Now the smoke's gone, he can see the Hindenburg, his secondaries are hammering him. Again, the Hindenburg is angling pretty well, but is he trying to get the torpedoes away from the other side? I think he is. He's overextended. The secondaries are going to be the ones to finish him off. There we go. 5 kills, Kraken Unleashed, and Close Quarters Expert, but he's not quite out of the woods yet because he's still flooding and burning, and that's when his damage control comes off cooldown, and he still has a couple of seconds left on the damage repair. So he's no longer in immediate danger of dying, and he can actually stop to take a breath. Now, there was an enemy destroyer around the other side of that island, so he's in no rush whatsoever to go nosing around the side of the island and find out if he's left any presents in the water for him. So, while nobody's actively trying to kill him for the first time in what seems like forever, let's just stop and take stock of the situation. He's done 270,000 damage, he's got 5 kills. There are still 2 enemy ships remaining, a Yugamo and an Amagi. But Heinrich, nice and safe for the moment behind the shelter of this island, is also capping Bravo. He's just parked right there inside the perimeter of the cap circle, so the enemy team are going to have to do something to get him out of there. Now he is detected, but he can't see the ship that's detected him. If I was that Yugamo, I would want to get some torpedoes away from outside of detection range. And that would mean heading over there. I mean, he was heading in that direction. From there, he could remain undetected and get some torpedoes into this largely immobile German battleship. But he's not there. And Chief Specialist in the Yamato, you've probably been wondering what he's been up to. He's just managed to spot the Amagi, who's coming around the other side of the island. And he does have his guns loaded for bear and is looking to sink Heinrich. Now, the Amagi doesn't have a huge amount of health remaining either, but he's got the broad flat side of Heinrich's ship, and Heinrich only has 2 of his gun turrets available to swing around and shoot back at him. The Amagi's in a pretty unenviable position, because he's basically taken fire from both directions from a Yamato and a Kurrywurst, and he's lucky not to be citadeled and sunk right there. But he has to keep sailing on this course, because he's taken fire from the other side from the Yamato, and he has to get that island between himself and Chief Specialist. Which means there's a limit to the amount of angling that he can do. But he's given it his best shot and he hasn't managed to sink Heinrich, and that's when Heinrich's 2 rear turrets finally swing around and put the Amagi to the bottom as well for his 6th kill. Heinrich's sonar is active, which means he gets advance warning of the Yugamo popping out, but well, he's never going to get the guns around in time. All he can do is hit him with the secondaries and hope it's going to be enough, and the sonar is really only giving him advance warning that this game is over as far as he's concerned. Full credit to the Yugamo, he definitely timed that perfectly, and yet look at the health he lost doing it. The secondaries nearly put him down, but that is the end of Heinrich's game. In order to have any chance of winning, that Yugamo is going to have to sink Chief Specialist in the Yamato, and Chief Specialist is not stupid enough to go chasing a Yugamo in tight, narrow waters like this. He's keeping that Yamato at a good distance. He's sitting on the points lead, and he's just waiting for the team to reach 1,000 points. This was, in fact, a win for Heinrich's team, with 290,000 damage done. High caliber, Bane of the Oceans, Confederate, close quarters expert, and Kraken unleashed. There is still a little drama to be had in chat, however, as the captain of the Amagi is extremely upset. He's accusing everybody of being cheaters and using aimbots because he just doesn't understand how Heinrich was able to see him coming around the other side of the island. Tier 8, and he still hasn't figured out how the spotting mechanics work. What the hell. But what a game. 290,000 damage. Unfortunately, I don't have the post-battle results screens for this match, but you can see the results right up there in the top right corner of the screen. That is one impressive collection of medals. So Heinrich, thank you very much for sending that one in. Very impressive. Everybody else, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.